Hello, my friends. It is Thursday, August 31st, and welcome to End Times Analysis. I am Pastor Jeff. Get a cup of coffee, take a seat, and let us reason together. We are looking at Ezekiel 38:14, and we're going to try to get to 15, but I don't know. There's so much good stuff. Ezekiel 38:14. Therefore, Son of Man, prophesy and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day, when my people Israel are living in safety, you will take notice of it. You will come from your place in the far north. This is 15. You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, great host, a mighty army. Gog is having a paradigm shift, a way of thinking. Defensive versus offensive strategy. We are looking at a lot of things tonight. And what we have to understand is, what is Gog thinking? How is his strategy, offensive versus defensive, bold moves versus conservative moves? We have to understand feelings. We like to think that we're controlled by our minds. We control by logic. How many times have we made a spur of the moment thing based on our feelings? This is one of the areas where the Islamic countries and, say, Gog, if it is Russia, have something in common. They know what it feels like to want something and have it just out of reach. The czars felt about Istanbul, Constantinople, the great cathedral of Santa Sofia, the way the Muslims feel about the Dome of the Rock. It's a like feeling. And when you have things that are together, when you have feelings that mix together, that can bring about a relationship. Some people say that Russia stayed in World War One because the Tsar and the provisional government, after the Tsar was overthrown, was promised the Bosporus Strait, the Bosporus Peninsula, where Constantinople, Istanbul was, when the Allies won. Turkey, remember the Ottoman Turks, were on the side of the Austrian-Hungarians in Germany. So they said that Constantinople was promised to Russia when the Allies won. Now let's look at this. Look at a few words. Sovereign Lord. God is in charge. God is the ruler. In that day could be another reference to the last days. We are living in the last days. So God has this confrontation in the planning stages. He's known about it. This has not caught God by surprise. This is in the planning stages. More likely when Israel has some kind of truth with its neighbors or agreement with the Islamic militants. Right now, that it looks like there's going to be some conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's a lot of rhetoric going back and forth about the northern border. Iran has even talked about, Israel and Iran have even talked about, Iran might have up to 5 nuclear weapons. We don't know. We don't know. There's a lot of things that can be bantered back and forth. Now, getting back, the Islamic militants, a defeat of the Lot military alliance in Psalm 83 could work here. Israel is living in safety. They got some type of military truce here. We're looking at a defeat of my near adversaries have been defeated. They would seek some kind of ceasefire or truce. Israel would be living in safety. Or maybe some more countries come in under the Abraham Accords, or some kind of arrangement between them, Saudi Arabia, about the temple. There has been some rumors that there is some give and take about the Temple Mount between Israel and Saudi Arabia. They are in somewhat of discussion. We don't know. That is not confirmed, but there's all kind of rumors out there, and let's just see where it comes from. It says, you will come from your place out of the far north, you and many people with you. Gog's invasion route is defined. This phrase can mean remote parts of the north, remote uttermost. And I'm probably gonna butcher this word. It is Hebrew, Yakaya. Hebrew means a remote area. The far means end, something different, far away. Now, in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, the phrase remote parts of the north, iskastos, the extreme, most remote, and barbarous north. History, the north has been the throughout history, the north has been the one of the favorite invasion routes to attack Israel. You look at Syria, then you look at Assyria, then you look at Babylon. Ezekiel 38:6 on a modern map, the country in the remote north is Russia or Rosh. Now, at the appointed time, Gog and those allied with him would come against Israel. Certainly, this includes the Gog coalition mentioned in Ezekiel 38:3 and 6, and likely means more, not specifically the name countries, but maybe a remnant of the Lot coalition, trying to regain some of their lost stature, maybe even some lost territory. Islamic militants that pulled out on the truce, all of a sudden they're reactivated. Maybe even possibly Egypt, because remember, Put, which is what we think of as Libya, and Kush, which we think of Sudan, maybe parts of Ethiopia, Eritrea, have to transverse Israel if they're going to attack, unless somehow Gog is going to move them from their place, go all the way up north, and bring them down with it. Possibility, but it just doesn't seem practical. It doesn't seem practical whatsoever. So maybe Egypt could be added to this. We don't know. It just says many people with you, and that gives the wording that there's going to be more people added on. And now have to come to pass through the land of Egypt. That look at all the nations that have voted against Israel in the UN. These could also be added in the Gog coalition. More and more African nations are pulling away from the West. They're going with China, with Russia. We right now have seen just a coup in Gabon, along with all the other coups that's going on throughout Africa. And these military juntas, military leaders, are pulling away from the Western orbit and going. Most we see China, but also with Russia. All of them riding on horses, a great company. Ezekiel describes the attack with the only image of that he had at the time. This is going to be a swift military attack. Gog will engage in a blitzkrieg style against Israel, looking for a quick knockout blow. Blitzkrieg means lightning war, where your enemy, where you use your forces to go deep penetration, encirclement of the enemy's armies, cutting logistics off and sweeping rapidly, using flanking movements, using probing things, having a combination of manpower, armor, and air all working together into for one point to take as much ground as possible, to cut off the logistics, and to encircle the other your opponent's armies. Think of the British at Dunkirk. They were pretty much encircled, and of course the defeat of the Belgians and the defeat of everybody else until the tide started to turn. And Ezekiel had to use images that made sense to him. He had never seen a tank or an armored personnel carrier. Here I go again, and everyone's going to maybe get a little upset at me. But let's look at history. History does predict how people act. Past history will predict future performance. This is not Putin's kind of war. So that's why, once again, I do not believe Putin is God. Putin's kind of war, he would have to have an entire paradigm shift. And Gog's paradigm of a conduct of war is more like Stalin and Zhukov in the Great Patriotic War, World War II, against the Nazis. A great charismatic leader will have to arise from Russia, this area, the Soviet Union. And Russia and the Soviet Union are not known for allowing military leaders to challenge the government. Even one of their greatest, Marshal Zhukov, was dismissed by Khrushchev. When Khrushchev had established his power and had consolidated it, he dismissed Zhukov. Look at the czars. They would bring up a general, put him in place, have him do it, and then once the war was over, he would kind of get pushed aside. They would give him a governorship of Siberia, or make him a prince of something out there. So Russia and the Soviet Union were not known to allow any type of military interference in the government. Now, what we're going to have to see with this, another paradigm shift. If this is going to happen, this military coalition, you're going to have to see the Gog paradigm take over. You're going to see a military alliance growing in with the Kremlin. Russia Defense Ministry, if Russia is talking about a decades long war with Ukraine, think about that, a decades long war with the Ukraine. The military is going to gain in power. And also the FSB, which is a Russian secret police, must also be gaining power because they have to keep control. Remember, you're the government. You've got to keep watch on your people and your generals. Russia does have a history. The Bolshevik Revolution was sparked by their military for coming against the provisional government, and then the communists standing up and going against. So there has been points in history where the military has been very involved in revolution in the Russia, the Soviet Union. Maybe a major or a colonel right now is making his mark in the Ukraine, and he will rise up in the ranks. And his strategy will be used instead of the traditional tactics of the Soviet Union or Russia. Russia and the Soviet Union, their counterinsurgency tactics, if you look at back their thing in the early part of the Soviet period in Central Asia, and also in their attack against Afghanistan, Mao Zedong had a phrase: the gorilla uses a people as a fish uses the water. I know I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's one of the interpretations. In other words, the gorilla needs the people. The people are his eyes, his ears, his logistics. He swims through the people the way the fish swims through the ocean. So what did the Soviets do? They tried to drain the ocean. They did not have an ethnic cleansing. They had a human cleansing where they would completely try to clear the area of all humans in that place. That's why there was so many refugees in Pakistan, in Iran. Some people think, some numbers would think maybe up to 1/3 to maybe almost one half of the country was either an internal refugee or an external refugee, Pakistan, Iran, or somewhere moving around in their own country. So if you look at how Russia conducts their anti-insurgency, their counterinsurgency, it is brutal. It is brutal. In this war will not be a war of attrition. We've talked about that. Deep penetration, blitzkrieg. That is a traditional kind of war that Russians have used to defend the homeland, using slow retreat, scorched earth, stretching the military of your enemies and the supply lines to their limits, then moving around, flanking them, cutting off your opponent's army and their logistics line, and slowly starving them to death. As they advance, they're losing the war. They're moving forward. It's completely, you think about what militaries think. I'm advancing, I'm taking territory, I'm holding, I'm controlling. But the more they hold, the more they control, the less they have, because they're using more and more of their men, more and more of their logistics, and it's been cut off. Sooner or later, Napoleon said it best: an army travels on a stomach, they're going to have to retreat. This is the type of war Russia has used throughout its history. When they have gotten aggressive outside the homeland, it has not gone well. First, they have a historical grudge against, Western allies who they have felt betrayed by. In the Crimea, in the Crimea War, they felt betrayed by the Austrians, which they supported in their 1848 rebellion against when the Hungarians rebelled against them. The Russo-Japanese War of 1905, they felt betrayed by pretty much most of the Western powers, but specifically Prussia and Austria. In World War I, when they invaded Prussia and the Allies insisted on very costly offensive against the Germans, Austrian, and Turkish line in order to relieve the Western Front, we've talked about this, or the Allies would withhold military supplies. And even World War II, when Stalin and Zhukov were getting lend-lease from the United States. They felt the Allies drained Soviet Russian manpower to defeat the Nazis. They were using Russia as this big shield and to drain the Nazi manpower. General Marshal Zhukov, General Marshall, and Zhukov had talked, and that there was original plans, but the plans didn't work. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and the Germans and the Italians' declaration of war against Germany, the USA was supposed to raise about 90 military divisions. Then the plan shifted to supply the Soviet Union via Iran and let Germany, the Wehrmacht, wear itself away on the Eastern Front, while the USA and Great Britain would pound them with uh, air superiority, and then later on use their manpower to take Africa, to go after a second front. But where that second front was a matter of conjecture for a long time. Churchill wanted to go through Italy, what he called the Axis off underbelly, or even up through Greece and Yugoslavia. He wanted to meet Uncle Joe as far east as possible. And after securing Africa, the U.S. pushed for a Normandy invasion, a Normandy, France invasion. The Soviet complained about the very slow pace of the start of the invasion and how Britain and America were kind of taking their time and they were relying too much on air power. Then the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, where the world was divided pretty much into different blocks, and the confrontation of the Cold War, where the once again Soviet allies, the Sino-Soviet break. Remember, Stalin died in 1953. Think about all the things that happened. The Soviets retreated, well, really moved back from Austria. They stopped. Also, the Korean War was negotiated, and even Germany, even East Germany, there is things that East Germany, Barrow was willing to work out deals with that. So after all that happened, and then Vera was taken care of by the party in Khrushchev. He was shot. Khrushchev established and consolidated his power. Zhukov gone. Then the secret speech where he condemned Stalin. From that point on, you see the Sino-Soviet split. Mao Zedong had been in charge of China since like 1949, I think, probably 1948, 1949. He had been in charge. He went into Korea, and about a year after he got in power. Russia has always had problems with its allies. Its best ally throughout the Cold War was East Germany, in the country that no longer exists, and Cuba. That was one of the few countries they could actually depend on. So, being the exception, the Cold War is considered an aggressive social economic confrontation by the Soviet Union. By avoiding direct hostilities with the West and using proxy wars in far countries. And the Soviet Union, that's where that today, fell due to military overreach. I know I'm making this very simple. It's a lot more intricate, but basically military overreach and a faulty party planned economic system. So something must change in the mindset of the rulers of the Gog paradigm. Maybe a new generation takes over and embraces new tactics. And it says that Gog will be the guard, will watch over its allies, be the main contributor. Could this be an old Russian mindset of really not trusting their allies? So the long history of failed alliances is still part of the mindset of the Gog coalition. Well, thank you so much for spending time. We didn't make it to 15, but thank you so much for spending some time with me. If you liked it, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe and the like button. And until we see each other again, my friends, Maranatha.